Welcome to the Banned America podcast. I'm your host, John Block. This week, in an uncharacteristic fashion of the normal do-nothing United States Senate, the Judiciary Committee on the Constitution, chaired by Senator Ted Cruz, focused on what Banned America is all about: censorship of speech and unfairly banning conservative voices. And during the committee hearing, they had executives from Twitter as well as Facebook, who both testified on their respective platforms' censorship of conservative voices. And they were grilled by many senators, including Senator Blackburn, who actually got an apology for one of her tweets. And Senator Ted Cruz printed up a big poster of a quote by Mother Teresa posted by the Susan B. Anthony list, which was banned and which was able to get in the record. A very harmless quote. And it just showed the hypocrisy of these companies that use their platforms for political gain. So we also saw Josh Hawley. He said, "This committee hearing, again, today shows that you are anything but transparent, and you apparently have no interest in becoming transparent. This is a huge, huge problem, and I would hope for the sake of the customers you serve and the values you purport to represent that you would change your behavior and change your commitments to providing a neutral, unbiased platform for all users in this country." The hearing also talked about the censorship of conservative pages by bringing up what quote-unquote is shadow banning, and Twitter denied engaging in the practice of shadow banning in the entire committee with the guy that they had there, and he said that they never downgrade users' posts. However, even just today, Banned America, we posted our video from Friday about Ilhan Omar, and that was stopped from being promoted because they said that it is offensive on Facebook. So we still have this problem here. We still have conservatives being banned from social media, from advertising on social media, and there's no greater champion of this message than the Unplanned movie, which was in fact a product of banning conservative speech, and it's not even a conservative issue. It's literally life or death. So we see this targeted censorship of messages that just simply don't go in the norms of traditional liberal thinking, which makes it quite alarming, especially when we see these groups take down real speech that doesn't have anything to do with violence, doesn't have anything to do with hatred. It simply has to do with our political philosophy. And everything can be deduced into political jargon. Everything can be talked about in political ways. So we can't just say that, oh, well, this is political speech because it offends my side. And we have these people, these Facebooks, these Twitters, these Instagrams that claim that they are as unbiased as possible, even though we see time and time again this banning is unacceptable. So thank goodness that we had Ted Cruz leading this Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution, and we heard Mazie Hirono and Senator Blumenthal making crazy comments, but they're going to do that anyway. They've always made these crazy comments, and we saw earlier this week Senator Mazie Hirono about how abortion should be everywhere for everyone, and we should only care about people who are already born. We see this dehumanization of just regular people like you and I, and we should never be banned. But these perpetrators, including Senator Hirono, including Senator Blumenthal, these people are accomplices to this banning of conservatives, and we must stand against it. So I'm really glad that Senator Ted Cruz made this uncharacteristic Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, and that there were representatives from the Unplanned movie as well as from Susan B. Anthony list, and both Twitter and Facebook to stand up for their organizations and defend the indefensible. And this week we saw a huge blow to the people of America, as well as to our veterans, our first responders, our firefighters, our policemen, who all helped in the tragedy of 9/11, where nearly 3,000 men, women, children of American heritage died that day, including innocent Muslims, at the hands of radical Islamic terrorists. And we saw Ilhan Omar brush this off at an event at CARE, the Center for Islamic American Relations, which is funded by Hamas, a terrorist group in Palestine. And she said that the horrible tragedy was, quote, "some people did something." This sparked firestorms from the media left and right. We had Democrat of New Mexico, Ben Ray Lujan, calling her out on this. We had Republicans, including conservative-leaning sources like the New York Post. The front cover of their magazine showed a photograph of the Twin Towers being hit by the Islamic terrorists in these planes. And it read, "Here's your something." And I stand completely with these people. Us at Band America stand completely with the patriots who are calling her out on this. But she has just doubled down and said that she couldn't be more American for these horrible comments. We also heard people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or Occasional Cortex, who actually defended her by calling Trump supporters and conservatives Nazis. She compared us to Nazis, which is absolutely despicable. And we see this, including people like Nancy Pelosi, who may I just regard as not the leader of her party and not the leader of the Democrats in the House, because no matter what she does, she still has to get that check off from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for final approval of everything. Ocasio-Cortez holds a large block of votes, socialist Democrat votes. And these votes, if Nancy cannot placate to them, she will not get her agenda through the House. So essentially, if you think about it, AOC is the leader of the Democrats in the House, and these radicals are standing behind Ilhan Omar, who has on multiple occasions said off-color things, especially towards the Jewish people, including people living in Israel, calling them Benjamins, and other people. We see these terrible, evil, terroristic apologist views coming from her, and we wonder why. We wonder why she is still allowed to stand around and do this. And she's not being censured because Nancy Pelosi has to placate to AOC and all the other socialists in the House to get her agenda through, because she does not really have that big of a majority. I think she has about 230 people, which is not a big majority in the House, and she needs this block of votes to get anything she wants through. So we see this extreme radicalism coming from her, and it's so important that we make sure to keep a check and balance on these Democrats and go on social media, talk about it, say this Islamic terrorist apologist, Ilhan Omar, AOC, and Tlaib, who are standing up for her, all need to be censured because this is absolutely despicable, and we should never, ever, ever downgrade the horrific tragedies that happened on 9/11 to our great American patriots, including 30 Muslim Americans who were innocent people killed by this extremist act of terrorism. And on the note regarding Ilhan Omar, we definitely want to say that we stand 100% with the people of Israel, including Benjamin Netanyahu, who we would love to congratulate for his incredible victory on being reelected and reshaping his government with his majority in his parliament. We hope that this relationship that President Trump has garnered with Prime Minister Netanyahu will continue for years, decades to come, in prosperity for both America and Israel, and we will ensure that we together can stand united as one alliance of countries to ensure that there is peace at home and abroad. And Israel, as well as America, will stand forever together in history. In other insane news, with SJWs getting their panties in a wad, we saw at Georgetown University, you would think one of the country's most elite universities, who has turned out incredible people like Steve Bannon and then former presidents like Bill Clinton, would have a slight amount of respect left with it. But obviously no, it does not have the pedigree it used to have, because this week its idiotic students, comprised of SJWs sporting purple locks and tattoos reading "resist," have voted to pay reparations for slavery of past generations at their school. And this would require a forced $27.20 fee each semester which would create a fund to help the descendants of 272 slaves sold in an auction in 1839. Now, this is just idiotic. In my humble opinion, this should never happen. Yes, slavery was terrible. Yes, slavery should never have happened. But to force people who have never owned slaves in their lives, many of which have never said a racist statement before, we see that this university, which claims to be Catholic, as a Jesuit institution, which Jesuit is not the highest regard when it comes to Catholic teaching, but you see these radical students, of the 3,845 students who voted, 2,546 students support this mandatory fee. 66%. I wonder if it was 66.6%, then that would make a little more of a difference, wouldn't it? But we see these extremists on campus forcing students that have never had a thing to do with slavery to pay $27 a semester for slavery reparations. How is this even a thing? How are we even talking about this in 2019? Far past the slavery era, as well as far past the civil rights era. We don't see this as a problem. So the best thing that we could ask for people in DC and people going to Georgetown University to write their deans, write the president of the college, and demand that you don't have to pay this idiotic, unnecessary, and quite offensive fee to pay for reparations for something you never did. You never did, and there is absolutely no reason to pay a dime to Georgetown University for extremist reparations for something you never did. It's like going to prison for murder when you've never even killed someone. That's what this is. But we saw two very smart, very incredible freshman students at Georgetown University. They penned an op-ed in the Hoya, which is Georgetown's oldest student newspaper, and they said, "In our tolerant and liberal society, we place great emphasis on the individual and her ability to make free choices. When the state or some other institution imposes one particular moral outlook or range of choices, it is frequently met with resistance. In contrast, the individual is expected to weigh her own circumstances and decide accordingly. This liberty promotes both a more just society and more individual happiness." And the people that wrote this, Talcock and Dye, they warned that the referendum involves a mandatory fee, which by nature resents a moral judgment on the responsibility of Georgetown students for the institution's past. And it contradicts that very value of liberty. Students would be compelled to act rather than having the choice to opt in. You're right. This is common sense. If we want freedom of speech and freedom of expression in a liberal society, then why is it that we're forcing people to do something? Why is it that we're forcing people to pay this fee? Why don't we make it a voluntary fee? Sure, go ahead. Make reparations. Everyone else in the whole world is talking about it. You hear presidential candidates saying, we need reparations, like Beto and Bernie and Warren. But the thing is, these kids, they're not all Democrats, okay? These kids, they're not even, half of them are probably not even registered to vote. These people should not be making these decisions and not be forced to pay these extreme taxes and these tariffs for being white, okay? This is absolutely asinine that these people have to do this. And really, at the end of the day, it makes me thank God that I went to public institutions and one Baptist institution and not to Georgetown University, which is obviously a liberal hellhole masked in Jesuit principles, which essentially means that they don't believe in God. They never did. And there is no proof to show that Georgetown University at this moment is acting in the best interest of its students, and we need to make sure that the students on campus that do care about these integral issues have the ability to speak, but not at the expense of their liberty, which is what is at stake if they're forced to pay this $27 fee for reparations that have nothing to do with them. They've never owned a slave, and it's actually just offensive to those kids to be forced to pay this, and especially their parents who have worked so hard to get their kids to soccer practice, get their kids to math tutors, get their students to excel in high school in order to get into Georgetown. And then we see this horrible thing forcing kids to pay reparations fees. It's absolutely disgusting. So this week, we should definitely reach out to our members of Congress, tell them to censure Omar for her crazy comments about 9/11 and demand an apology. We also need to reach out to people at Georgetown University and implore them to write the dean, tell them, no, we do not want to have crazy fees on our students. And lastly, we need to continue to advocate against censorship, including of Banned America, on social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook. Thank you all so much for listening and have a great week.